Hey, Mike from Preppers here, and today we're going to break down how you can pull as much helpful information as possible from your score details and your score report from the digital SAT that you took. Now, unfortunately, the way that College Board is releasing the scores is really confusing to a lot of students. They're unsure of what these bars mean, and they're unsure of what these different categories such as information and ideas, standard English conventions, advanced math actually mean in terms of the types of questions that they are missing on test day and what types of questions they need to be practicing with, what skills and content they need to be learning to make sure they don't miss something similar on their future SAT. So we're going to cover all of that in depth throughout this video. I'm also going to talk about some recommendations that I would give you in terms of the easiest places to improve on reading and writing and math, and depending upon your general score bands, about what you should be doing to make sure you're improving as much as possible heading into your next SAT. Now, before we get into the reading and writing categories, we're going to talk about the bars, and these can be quite confusing. So I'm going to pull up a first example here from one of my students who got a 750 on the reading and writing portion of the test. But what this basically shows us is we can have full bars and we still can be missing questions. And you'll even see that little performance range below. It's going to say 680 to 800. That means we could have full bars and we could score anywhere from 680 to 800. So if we have full bars on a category, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a place we don't still need to address, but it's a place that we have an unknown from them. Now, on the other hand, I'm going to pull up another score report here. Now, in this case, it's a lot more obvious where our content deficiencies are lying. So what you really just want to do in terms of your bars is the more bars you're missing, the more important that place is to address, because we're going to have more points that we can pick up from there. But if you're scoring very highly and you have full bars, it doesn't mean that we still don't need to learn those rules. Most likely, it means we really need to focus on the most advanced of those varieties to improve your score further. Now, the first category we're going to jump into are information and ideas. So these are essentially just your reading comprehension skills here. So these are exclusively reading questions in the reading and writing module. So these are specific detail questions such as this, main idea questions such as this, data questions such as this, and then all of our claims questions such as this. So these can be support the claim, weaken the claim, and illustrate the claim. And the last, which is probably the toughest variety for most students, are logically completes the text questions. Now, if you are struggling here, there's probably a few things that you're struggling with. The most common for most students is you feel like you get to these types of reading questions and you feel like there could be more than one correct answer, or you're really stuck on what the SAT is actually asking you to do for these different question varieties. So the first thing that I always teach students is understanding the 6 common types of wrong answer choices on the SAT, what makes stuff right versus wrong, and the core principles we need to understand for SAT reading, and then we get into more specific approaches and strategies for each of the question types. This is all covered really in depth in our digital SAT reading course. Now, the next scoring detail is craft and structure, and this one is a little bit tricky to pull helpful information from because for only reasons that College Board knows, they have decided to lump together 2 very different skill sets here. We have our word and context questions, which are way more heavily focused around vocabulary, and we have 3 types of what I would classify as reading questions. These are your main purpose questions, your overall structure questions, and your function questions. So if you did poorly with information and ideas, most likely we also need to address these structure questions, purpose questions, and function questions. If you did better there and worse here, vocabulary is probably the place that you really need to focus, along with learning how we should approach these word and context questions. So we have an ongoing list of words that have already appeared on the digital SAT because they are repeating some of these, but vocab is really, really important to learn because they are including some very advanced words such as ineluctable, inextricable. If you aren't prepped for these, not many high schoolers are going to be familiar with these. All of that is also in our same reading course. Now we're getting into what I classify as the writing portion of the reading and writing modules, and therefore these are also covered in our writing course. And the first one up is expressions of ideas. These are the last 2 types of questions that you're going to see in your reading and writing modules. These are your transitions questions and your notes questions. This is also one of the easiest places to improve your score because most of what we're really doing here is learning how we should be approaching these notes questions and transitions questions. And for transitions, many students need to do a little bit of studying to familiarize themselves with the types of transitions that show up on the SAT. and what relationships they signal. But once we do those few things, we can really start to get pretty much all of these questions correct on test day. Now, our final category for reading and writing is standard English conventions. And for most students, when they get to these questions on test day, if they have not been prepped properly, they're really picking based off of what feels right or looks right or sounds right. And this is one of the easiest places to improve and really make sure you're going to basically score perfectly here. There's very black and white grammar rules, and once we learn those and we learn how to spot the different varieties, there's really nothing stopping us from scoring perfectly here. So if you want to learn some of our really important foundational rules around independent and dependent clauses, how to spot the differences between them and how to connect them, which shows up on every single SAT, I strongly recommend checking out the free trial to our Ultimate SAT course. You don't need a credit card or anything, and you're going to learn some of those most important rules and strategies to help you improve your score here. Now, as we get to the math portion of the test, interpreting our details gets a whole lot more challenging. Each of these different categories lumps together so many different question types, and because of course we don't know the specific thing you missed on test day, it's a lot harder to pull out very specific actionable information from this. But we're going to talk about what I've done and what has worked best with many students. Now, before we get to that, we're going to break down what each of these different categories actually represents. So our first scoring category is going to be our algebra skills. And as you can see here, these lump together quite a few different concepts, and the chapter numbers that you see listed there are the chapter numbers that correspond to our math book here. Similarly, advanced math, which often really trips a lot of students up, you can see all the categories that it relates to here. Next up is problem solving and data analysis. And our final one is geometry and trigonometry. Now, although we have this challenge of it being very difficult to know exactly what tripped you up on test day, there's a few things that we can still do to really quickly start to attack the areas that you struggled on and improve your score. So first thing I'd recommend is ordering a copy of our math book. And if you have any of these particular categories that you scored very low in, work through those chapters first in the math book. That's going to be one of the easiest ways for you to make some quick wins and really start improving your score. Now, once you've done that, and I'll also talk about what to do if you just struggled on the harder module in a minute here, but once you've done that, what I also really recommend to do is to use the study guides at the front of our book. Now, we've created a pretty innovative and unique leveling system that I'm going to pop on the screen here, but this has broken everything in our book between 4 different study guides we have, all of the concepts on the teaching pages, and every single question in the book across these 4 different levels. So once you've attacked those chapters that you first struggled with, going back to the front of the book or using our math course as well, in working through the levels that correspond to your general score range is a fantastic way for us to start to quickly improve your score. And as you basically bump up to the next level or next kind of score band, you then should work through that next level study guide. This has been a super effective way for students to significantly improve their math scores on the digital SAT. Now, kind of the final finishing touch, and this is really helpful for students if you just struggled on that second harder module where you feel like you have a really good foundation on all of the concepts, but you just get to that second harder module and you're just kind of stumped. What really recommend there, of course, is working through level 3 and 4 study guides in our math book, and then also working through our advanced math course. It's really just going to be focused around those most difficult types of questions that you can see on test day. But what I really recommend to do is start by working through the level 3 and 4 questions in the book, and then use that advanced math course as we get really close to test day. I've had fantastic results with students doing that. Had tons of students scoring 750 plus and getting some perfect scores here. Now, if you're really looking for a comprehensive course, which is going to cover everything that we've discussed throughout this video and really make sure you're far better prepared for your next SAT test date, I strongly recommend checking out my Ultimate SAT course. It's backed by a 100-point score improvement guarantee. It's delivered a lot of amazing results for students so far in the digital SAT. At the bare minimum, I strongly recommend checking out that free trial, where you can also check out a free chapter of our math book and some of our advanced math course. I hope this video has been really helpful and helped you start to understand what went wrong for you on test day and how you can start to go ahead and improve. If you guys have any questions at all, drop them in the comments.